Cybersecurity headlines.
How to respond to a data breach. Cyber insurer predicts a rise in critical CVEs, and multi-cloud still not secure enough. These are some of the stories that my colleagues and I have been bringing to you on this week's cybersecurity headlines. And now we get a chance for some insight, opinion, and definitely some expertise on these stories and more from our guest, Ed Covert, head of cyber risk engineering at Bowhead Specialty. Ed, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you guys for having me. This is a dream come true.
All right. Well, and just a reminder, Ed is joining us to share his opinions. They do not represent the views of his employer. Before we move on, we have to thank our sponsor, us, the CISO Series. We'll be talking about how you can get involved in joining us as we continue to grow our shows across the network. Remember, you can join us on YouTube Live. Go to CISOseries.com, hit the events drop down, and look for the cybersecurity headlines. We can review image. Just count it. It's the third one down. Just click and you can join us. We've got about 20 minutes, though, so let's get going. First up here, a tale of two data breaches. Let's connect the dots here, Ed, real quick. People Connect, which operates the background check services Truthfinder and In-State Checkmate, confirmed that threat actors exposed an April 2019 backup database with information on over 20 million customers across two services last month. Information exposed impacted customers from 2011 to 2019, included emails, hash passwords, names, and phone numbers. The breach is being attributed to an inadvertent leak or theft of a particular list and not a network breach, although it's a little light on specifics. Let's contrast that with Reddit confirming an unauthorized third party accessed its internal business systems last Sunday, exfiltrating internal documents and source code. The party gained access through a phishing attack against a Reddit employee, spoofing a Reddit intranet page to obtain their login credentials. The employee soon alerted Reddit, realizing they perhaps got spoofed. There is no evidence of access to its production systems, which would include things like credit card information or actual user data. Ed, we've got two kind of competing views here on maybe how to respond to a breach or the tenor and speed to do so. What are your thoughts on these?
Yeah, so these are sort of fascinating contrasts in my mind. Let's start with the Reddit one. It looks like somebody realized they made a mistake and alerted the company, and boom, Bob's your uncle. There's a notice that went out, right? And then you have the other one. A couple things come to mind on this. One, it doesn't look like there were any sort of SOC alerting rules for when data goes missing, right? It doesn't look like there's any DLP controls to prevent data from leaving the enterprise, however you're defining your enterprise. But the thing that caught my attention when I was looking through this story was one of two things happened here with the People Connect one. One is they didn't know that there was critical data that they weren't monitoring. Or two, they didn't think it was critical data, right? And neither one of those is a great look, in my view. So, People Connect, pay your security people more, put better rules in place, better monitoring.
Yeah, definitely interesting to see both of these stories come out this week. And hey, Reddit, good on you for being upfront. Appreciate that. Seriously. Yep. All right, next up here, Cyber Insurer predicts a rise in critical CVEs. This comes from a new cyber threat index from the insurance firm Coalition, and it predicts that 2023 will see an average of 1,900 monthly critical CVEs, and that's up 13% on the year. Of these, it forecasts 14% will be high severity and 8% will be critical severity. Coalition derived this estimate based on underwriting and claims data, internet scans, and its network of honeypots aggregated over the past 10 years, so they have some predictive modeling there. The index also found that 95% of organizations it scanned in 2022 exposed at least one unencrypted service to the internet. And remote desktop protocol remains the most scanned for protocol by attackers, pretty much going to be that way for a good long time, I have a feeling like. But Ed, kind of a picnic basket story here, a lot to choose from. What kind of stood out to you? The rise in CVEs, the 95% of firms exposed and stuff. What stands out to you?
Well, and I gotta be very careful here because obviously Coalition Cyber Risk Insurance, my company also does cyber risk insurance, and I don't want to ding a competitor on a live broadcast. But what caught my attention, honestly, was the value in this prediction. Mm-hmm. So they're predicting almost 2,000 CVs a month coming out in 2023. I don't understand what value we're getting from that data. What that report's trying to tell. There's a lot of great stuff in the rest of the coalition report. I was going through it, a lot of great analysis. I'm not sure what value telling everyone you're going to get 2,000 more CVEs a month is getting you, as in coalition's case, they're insureds, or just in a cybersecurity standpoint. What is that? Why do I care? I mean, other than, yes, I know I'm going to have to do more work, but we knew that going into it. We knew this is going to be a busy year. Every year is a busy year in this business. So I guess that's the part I don't understand. It was one of the headlines, 2,000 a month. So what?
I guess to play devil's advocate, because I do see your point here. Does this give decision makers within a business, I guess, a greater any kind of greater fidelity, I guess, of understanding, I guess, the scope of the security burden that's going to be on them, or is it just here is a number, we can predict this because we see these getting out here, we have a lot of historical data that we can draw on, we're an insurance company, we're probably pretty good at predicting things, or at least putting money behind predictions, right?
Right. And it is a strong predictive model, and I'm not faulting the model. I'm just, if you read farther down in the report, they're almost telling you, if you use our service, we can help remediate or solve some of this. So it almost sounds sales pitchy. I don't know if that was their intent, but that's how I read it. And I don't know that that's where I would have gone with it. That's all.
All right, next up here, FAA needs until 2030 to fix its safety system. On Tuesday, House lawmakers held a hearing on aviation safety to raise questions about the January 11th meltdown of the Federal Aviation Administration's Notice to Air Mission Systems, or NOTAM. While the FAA says it has fixed the root cause of last month's failure, the system still has other issues. According to numerous sources, the system's antiquated language and unnecessary info make its bulletins hard for pilots to just interpret. Congress first ordered the FAA to begin updating NOTAM back in 2012, but Acting Administrator Billy Nolan informed lawmakers that fixes won't be fully implemented until 2030. So, Ed, given the NOTAM incident, made all the headlines and certainly impacted a lot of traffic, and even the Southwest Airlines debacle during the Christmas winter storm, it seems like fixing critical infrastructure is critical. I mean, who would have thought? Its complexity may mean at least 7 years of rework, but is that acceptable given the importance of air travel and cargo, or does does the time it takes to do that reflect the criticality of those industries?
There's a lot to unpack here. I'll start with the fact that I did 20 years of federal contracting, right? And the FAA was a client of mine, DOT was a client of mine back in the day. Let's set aside the Southwest thing for a second, and we'll come back to that. So I think the point they're making here is it is absolutely critical to get this right. And having worked in government IT spaces for obviously for a long time, it is very hard to do that. It is a very slow moving ship that they're trying to turn. There are contracting rules and, federal acquisition regulations and all that sort of jazz that make it hard, not unnecessarily hard, but they make it more challenging to move with alacrity, if you will, when there's something that needs to be fixed. Now let's pivot to the Southwest thing. Southwest is a private company. They have the ability, in my mind, if they have an issue with their IT infrastructure, they should put resources to it. That is, nothing needs to be appropriated by Congress to make that happen. So the board needs to decide that this is something that they care about, and they'll fix it. It's going to take a year, 2 years, however long it's going to take to fix something of that nature. But it's not going to take 20 years. It's not going to take 10 years, 5 years. It can be done, and it's a whole lot less hoops to jump through. So I think we need to separate those concepts out.
All right. And organizations lack security architecture to support multi-cloud strategy. A new report from Valtix found that 28% of IT leaders strongly believe multi-cloud is, quote, a bad idea, citing difficulty to consistently secure such environments, lack of tooling, and a lack of multi-cloud reference architectures as their chief concerns. Responding organizations also cited several unintentional factors that have accelerated their multi-cloud journey, including things like shadow IT, software vendors, and mergers and acquisitions. While just 57% of IT leaders are sure that multi-cloud security is achievable, just achievable, mind you. 95% admit they'll still need to embrace it as a strategic priority this year. So, Ed, after all these years, multi-cloud still a tough sell. Why do you think this is, and what do you see as its future here?
Well, in my view, and again, this is just my hot take, it's because cyber's not at that decision table making those decisions about cloud. So there's a great sort of quote, and somebody out there will remind me who said it. I can't for life of me think of it who it is right now, but it's the cloud is great at letting you do stupid things faster, right? You can put entire applications up in minutes, but that doesn't mean that they're secure. It just means that you can put it up there. So I think part of what you're seeing here is not having cyber in the room when the business, that's who's driving this, right? The business, we work for the business. When the business says we want to do something on Azure as opposed to AWS or as opposed to Google, even though we're already an AWS shop, right? That's how you end up with multi-cloud sort of shadow IT. You need to get cyber in the room and get them involved and actually work up a strategy. That requires thought and effort. And it's unfortunately not at the speed of business right now. But I'll just plug my own history here. If you build an enterprise security architecture around the idea of what you're trying to secure, boom, then you can have multi-cloud and you at least go into it secure with the controls you want.
All right, before we move on to our next story, let's spend a few moments with our sponsor, us, the CISO Series. One of the most fun things about this job and doing this show is we get to hear from CISOs that they start out their day with the show, that they share it with their teams, that it's in fact required listening for some security teams. And that really puts a lot of responsibility on us to do a really great show, but it's an honor to be part of that. They listen and they make decisions based on what they hear on this show. Do you have a solution that needs to find the attention of the right audience of cyber professionals? If so, we're interested in your sponsorship. You can email us info@cisoseries.com, and we look forward to hearing from you. Next up here, Chinese phones collect PII. Researchers at the University of Edinburgh and Trinity College Dublin have found that Chinese phone makers like Xiaomi, OnePlus, and Oppo's Realme collect extensive data on users without consent. This involves data directly from the OS as well as pre-installed apps. The personally identifiable information appears to go to both the phone vendor as well as service providers and network operators. The researcher found no way to opt out of this collection, and data collection didn't appear to stop if you just left China. Devices were sending information to carriers and vendors even when just connected over Wi-Fi, no SIM card even needed there. And possibly the least surprising story of the week, but definitely has serious ramifications, not only for Chinese consumers, but numerous potential spillover effects. I'm curious, have you checked out the story? What's your take?
Well, I have not read the details of this particular story. I will say this is something that if you're still surprised that this is possible, the Chinese government is collecting PII through a vast global sensor network, you perhaps have been living in a cave for the last 15 years. So it's just, I'm not even sure why this is news. This is, to be honest with you.
Well, I think a couple things that stood out to me is one, Realme, obviously a big presence in China and in India. Same with Xiaomi, but OnePlus, I think we see as a Western-facing brand. And given that we've seen sanctions, targeting ZTE, Huawei, other phone producers, if this is indeed the case, I think the potential for seeing more sanctions and stuff against these type of companies that have a much bigger presence, certainly in the U.S. and in other countries outside of China, definitely raised some eyebrows. I guess seeing this confirmed, right? It's the unwritten rule, right, that all of this is happening. But now we have, we have security researchers that are doing the work and seeing that this is happening, right?
So doing my analysis literally in real time on a live broadcast, I will say one thing that it makes me wonder a little bit more about this is the sort of the software bill of materials aspect, because all of these phone manufacturers or phone makers, I'm not convinced that their parts aren't in US phones to a certain degree. So now I start wondering, okay, what component that's enabling this in OnePlus or in Oppo's Realme is perhaps in my Android or my iPhone. So now I can see a little more concern on my part that I'm like, okay, it's more than just, yeah, duh. It's now reality and something I
Yeah.
need to concern myself with.
Well, and definitely something, as we see the regulatory landscape shifting kind of rapidly when it in regards to China, seeing if more companies kind of get caught up with CFIUS or with any of the other agencies that are, kind of controlling the flow of goods into the country. So we will definitely see
Right.
that. Next up here, experts publish a list of proxy IPs used by the pro-Russia group Killnet. Last week, we discussed Killnet's DDoS attempts in Germany. Now, researchers at Security Scorecard have published a list of proxy IPs used by the intended to interfere with its operations and block its attacks. The list of almost 18,000 proxy IPs was published on GitHub and includes addresses used by other organizations. Ed, do you feel this is an effective action, or is this just going to be cat and mouse? They switch out to other IPs to assist in their operations.
Yeah, this is just cat and mouse. They'll switch out to other proxies. I'm sorry. It is important to do, and it's a thing that has to be done. You have to sort of, but this is whack-a-mole. They'll find other proxies to make it work.
Yeah, we've seen a number of instances of whether it comes to ransomware organizations or just any kind of threat groups. We've seen more concerted effort seemingly having an effect, and I feel like this is again, this is something that has to be done, but this is not like we're not taking down a botnet here with this, right? This is
Right.
we've inconvenienced them, and they will find ways around it, right?
Correct. That would be my opinion as well.
All right. And our last story here, the week ChatGPT exploded. This week, we have seen AI-powered generative technology take the world by storm, with everyone rushing out to either ask ChatGPT a question or to announce their own model. Google launched Bard. Alibaba and Baidu announced their own products. Microsoft showed off some of their generative AI systems going into Edge and Bing. So, Ed, in your opinion, is this a quote world-changing event? As people seem to say, it appears to be both a friend and a foe to cybersecurity. What advice do you have to CISOs in the dawn of generative AI?
So my advice is just pay attention to it. Don't let it consume you. I think, and I know you don't like when somebody says, I don't know, I need to give it some more thought. And I'm not going to say that. I am going to say, though, that when we look back in 5 years, I am convinced we will see this moment as a world-changing event. I don't know that we can call it that now.
Okay.
If that makes sense. I think we need a lot more hindsight. Friend or foe, like anything, it is both. Any tool we create is in the cyber world is both friend and foe, right? Metasploit being a prime example. Kali Linux, pick one. But I don't want to say it's the world's on fire and we should all run for the hills, but we might be saying that 5 years from now. That this was a moment of inflection, if you will.
I mean, definitely, it feels like that. It also does remind me a little bit of when like voice assistants first came out. Obviously, the potential here is a lot bigger, but I felt the same rush, we've reached science fiction level technology. The one thing that encourages me is seeing already what Microsoft is doing with their Prometheus engine, which is a more tuned version of GPT 3.5 or something along those lines.
Right.
We've also seen JD.com announce they're calling it an industrial version of a chatbot, like these more specialized chatbots that I feel like will be more useful tools for different verticals. Microsoft, being a giant security company, assuredly is going to be introducing something that's more security focused in there that I feel like could be a very valuable tool for a lot of organizations. So that's what gives me hope, is that yes, everyone will have access to these generalized chatbots, but it's these, and we've seen people already trying to get around restrictions that have been put in place on those, but that companies will also be coming up with more specialized stuff to kind of level the playing field, so to speak.
I agree. I think you're going to just, it's a double-edged sword. Everything we do is a double-edged sword. And I think that, to your point about what, company or bad actors, researchers, call them what you want, trying to trick chatbot or ChatGPT into doing things that it's not supposed to do. That's bad. But then putting regenerative chat in, Microsoft's Sentinel systems or something, that might be helpful. I don't know that we know enough at this point. It's been out for what, a month?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a little early in my mind to call it world changing, but the potential is probably there.
All right. Well, Ed, was there any story that was a thumbs up or an eye roller for you before we get out of here?
Well, the eye roll was the Chinese PII. I mean, come on, that's just
straight to the back of the head for you.
Yeah, I mean, and that part of it is my background and some stuff I did in my history in my past. And I'm just like, come on, we all knew this was happening. Why is this news?
Well, Ed Covert, the head of cyber risk engineering at Bowhead Specialty, thank you so much for being on the show. If people want to follow you on the cyberspace, where should we send them?
I am on LinkedIn, I am on Twitter, and I'm on Mastodon. So
Excellent.
I'm the only Ed Covert, I think, in most of those spaces.
All right. Well, we will be looking for you there. And of course, we want to thank our sponsor for today, us, the CISO Series. By the way, you're welcome. Reminder, there will be no episode of Super Cyber Friday on account of President's Day, the long weekend, but the Weekend Review Show will be here. And of course, cybersecurity headlines will be available every single day of next week to deliver about 7 minutes of the most important cybersecurity headlines that you need to know about. You can also subscribe to the show through our newsletter on LinkedIn. There you can read and or hear the show right from your inbox. Either any way you want it, we will give it to you. Just go to CISO Series page on LinkedIn to subscribe. Until the next time we meet, I am Rich Stroffolino, reminding you to have a super sparkly day.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOseries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.